far as favorite show, I'm probably torn between two. Um, the first one that comes to mind is just my first show. We did El Toro, Caliente. We did Fire Dance. We had some ridiculously great visuals. One of my favorite visuals was this slow, half-tempo, high knee that we would bring to your chest as you lean down to the side, and essentially, effectively, you would do something like this, and it ended up being repeated in a couple different shows throughout the next 3 or 4 years that I was there. But it was just such a powerful visual. It was a lot of fun, and it led right into how that show ended, which was with the 1812 Overture, which ended up becoming one of my favorite songs. At first, I didn't think that the matchup between El Toro, Caliente, Fire Dance, and 1812 Overture made any sense, but it was a lot of fun, and I think we ended up having fireworks for that show. So it was just a great experience. I think we may have even had a flyover. The ironic thing is that, I guess to touch on something that we had already discussed, so one of my more disappointing moments was when I finished my first show. So being a part of a high school, when you finish playing, you're usually exhausted, usually out of breath, and you are standing right there in front of people who are 15 feet away from you, just across the track, all staring at you, clapping, screaming, whatever, hopefully clapping and screaming. So it was just it was a very personal, real experience, and you knew that if you messed up on a high school marching band of 80 to 100, people would know. So it was important for you to be on your game at all times. Being part of such a much larger organization than I'd ever been a part of before, with so many people who were, distance-wise removed from the band itself. When I finished that first show, I didn't feel out of breath. I didn't feel like it was as exhilarating as the first time I marched in high school. Maybe that was just because I oversold it, and the 64,000 fans screaming at you was something that was a little hyperbolized, maybe, but it was just it was something I had to adjust to. One of my other favorite shows was actually one where we as clarinets did not have to march very much, and it was a show where we played Great Hornet. And it was fantastic because it was one of the most difficult shows musically that the clarinet section had to play. There were a number of instances where we would have a run or a patch in a song that was really tricky, or a lot of 16th notes, but the nature of the music in Green Hornet, not only did it feature the woodwinds, which was wonderful, but it wasn't even that was the most thrilling. It was just that the music was challenging, and being a part of the clarinet section, as with a lot of sections, especially the bigger sections, you have major gaps in talent. You have people in that section who were virtuoso, effectively. Brian Myers is a great example. He was one of the drum majors for 3 years in 2006, 2009, I believe. But he's also one of the best clarinet players I've ever heard. And he just blows your mind. And Bonnie Carlson is another phenomenal example. So we had people like them who had been playing for a long time, who were part of the wind ensemble, who could crush all the competition. Case in point, a couple years ago, I'm not sure if Dr. Reese is still doing this, but we had a little playoff where people would do scales, and then we would do scales in thirds, and then do scales in fourths, and every section could send up a couple people, and it was basically in front of the entire band, and it would just be a playoff, and Bonnie ended up just destroying it. But in second place, I believe, was Colin Jones, who was another clarinet player. So we had people who were just mind-blowingly good with the technical skills, and then we had people who were struggling to play an open G, which is just, for clarinet players, it's no finger, you put your lips on the mouthpiece and blow. And to the point where we would say, oh, just play an open G, and they would ask me, what's the fingering for that? I don't know that one. There were tons of people who didn't know the fight song, who couldn't play the first down cheer. Anyway, for me, as a probably middle of the road player, I was kind of shocked when I first became a section leader about the disparity in the talent. But for whatever reason, we being, I believe that was third year, so that would have been Colin Jones, who was one of the section leaders with Bonnie Carlson and I. We worked intensely with the clarinet section, and I worked with the third part, so I ended up having a lot of people who, some very good players, but ended up being a little bit less technically skilled, and just being able to work with them and just really kind of pounding out these terrible rhythms, all these accidentals and all these odd fingerings and whatnot. It was just a lot of fun. It was probably the most challenging music, and I think everybody in the clarinet section, and certainly the piccolo section, had a lot of fun with that song because they were the feature. They were a big part of it, and it was great to see the brass players try to punch because they were struggling so much. And for woodwind players, we'd have 48 counts to get across the entire length of the field. Watching them trying to do these little boxes and things like that, which in our minds, child's play, they were struggling with, and we just loved that we didn't have to move. It was great. It's a nice change of pace. I will say that my least favorite halftime show was the one where we did Electric Slide. Mostly because the woodwinds just played this doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and that was the entirety of the song for us. It was just absolutely annoying. We were trying to do some kind of field visual that looked like the Electric Slide. Didn't quite work out. It was a 1 week show, and we had another dance tune before that. I just wasn't very good with it. It was boring music, and the crowd didn't get into it as much as I would have liked. The woodwinds were originally supposed to perform it, but never did. I think it's just because the sound was a little rough, and we didn't have enough time to really perfect things, and Mr. Pope was very adamant about it looking good. Dr. Hughes was as well. And without it looking good, we just decided to cut it, which was disappointing for a lot of us because the woodwinds have been working on it very diligently up until that point. And even though it wasn't perfect, we really wanted to do that. That was the fun for us of doing that song, and it kind of took the wind out of our sails a little bit more than we had hoped. In terms of my favorite drill work, there was actually one scenario. I'm trying to remember the show, but I can't recall what the music was. But the drill involved. Actually, I take it back. This is a show that happened my 5th year. So while I was a graduate assistant, I didn't actually march this, but it was just a lot of fun to be a part of. Was this drill that Mr. Cook had worked up, where 2 people were throwing a football, and at one point see the person go to kick the football and go through what looked like a goal post, and just even though it was a stick figure, it was phenomenally done, and it was a lot of fun to just be up in the stands and watch and to see things like that move. One of the reasons why I liked it so much is because it wasn't just a shape. It all made sense, and I think that's one of the things that I really appreciated about our pregame, is that it was very intentional. We had things like the Power B and creating a rotunda, which was another great set. We never got it right for whatever reason. Lines apparently were our downfall. We could do arcs, like the best one, but we couldn't do lines. I never really understood that. But it was a really interesting scenario because 90% of the drill that I was a part of on the field were just shapes. And it was interesting, and seeing one shape move into a new shape was fun, but it didn't make a lot of sense in the music. It was just, this is a fun picture, and here's another fun picture. So when we had some kind of, in my mind, reason behind the drill itself, and we were watching this football game happening on the football field, but with marching band members simulating, it was fun to be a part of, and it was exciting to see, I don't know, to make it feel like you're actually producing something, you're telling a story, not just with music, but also with the drill. And I think in recent years, that's something that the band has certainly gotten better with, and I really appreciate that, even with the new opening set that the band does of marching out in the VA crossing, which I think is fantastic. It sets the show off on the right foot, it's more school spirits, and it's something that just, I'm surprised it took us so long to introduce this thing. There are 2 good football memories that I have from being at those games. The first one was the UVA Florida State game. I believe that was 2005, when Florida State was number 2 or number 3. Top 5. I'll say top 5. I'm not sure. And they came to UVA, and UVA was having kind of a mediocre season for UVA. That was probably a pretty good season. But it's back when we still had Al Groh as our head coach, and they came to town expecting to just stomp UVA, and we just really gave them a fantastic game. We looked excellent throughout the entirety of it. We were going par for par, point for point, all the way through until the end, where we had a fake field goal attempt, correct, and ended up throwing for this little trick play and ended up throwing a touchdown. The guy just walked into the end zone, and it was fantastic. I just remember being in the band and being right next to the student section, and everybody just erupted in cheers. And that place was just absolutely insane. Scott Stadium, I've never heard be so loud. And then, of course, everybody rushed the field. The band did not, but most of the students rushed the field. Some people went to the hospital because they were jumping on the field or the goalposts and falling off of them and hurting their necks and things of that nature. But it was an absolute insane experience, and it kind of set the tone of expectation for what I wanted to have happen every single football game. Unfortunately, UVA did not continue that winning streak. We ended up going to a bowl game though that year, which was a lot of fun, and it was excellent to be able to go to a couple of those. Should have gone before Algro, but hopefully you're enjoying retirement right now. My other favorite band experience was actually an away game in Maryland, and I was, if I'm correct, I was a graduate assistant at this point, and it was just a miserable day. We got there, and it was just pouring rain. Everybody was in their ponchos, and the game itself was going pretty well. We had, in fact, we sent Chris Long, so maybe I wasn't a graduate assistant, so we had Chris Long at that point. He scored a safety, which was huge, and then we ended up getting a couple turnovers, ended up beating Maryland at their own stadium. And for those who have been to the Maryland Stadium, you know that Maryland fans are not exactly the most friendly. We had some people throwing beer bottles in our direction, and everybody was cursing at us. And it's not just Maryland fans; UVA fans do it all the time too. But we do it with polos on, so it looks classier. But anyway, so we went there and just absolutely blew them out of the water in terms of sound as a marching band. And I remember one of the big things that they were upset about was we were playing so loud that they came over and they asked us to not play as often. They thought that we were mic'd because the way that Dr. Peace likes to communicate with the band, or other people like to communicate with the band, is to have loudspeakers facing into the stands, and he has a headset on that way, we can always hear him. And the people working for Maryland assumed that was us being mic'd. They were amplifying the music, the sound, and that may have been happening. But regardless, it was just a ton of fun. It was an absolutely wild experience, and kind of turned a miserable day into a really, really fun time. And I think the best part about it is when you listen to the radio commentary and the TV commentary afterwards, they even commented on the fact that UVA's band was just destroying Maryland's band in terms of sounds, and basically just we embarrassed them on the field, and we almost embarrassed them in the stands. And it was kind of a rewarding experience as a Wahoo in general, just to be a part of that. Watch Mr. P's, Dr. P's, slowly aggravate everyone in the ACC who wasn't working for the University of Virginia. So that was a lot of fun. The two bowl games that I went to were the Music City Bowl in Nashville in 2005, end of the year, where UVA played Minnesota, the Gophers, and that was a fantastic experience, with the exception of the stupid Gopher mascot. No offense, Minnesota, but I just couldn't take it, because every single time the Gopher would come over and try and start a fight with Cabman, and the Gopher's favorite thing to do was to turn his hat around, his headpiece around, so it looked like his body was spinning in a different direction, and it just looked dumb, and I just wanted to rip it off. And he was always trying to get into a fight with the Catman mascot. But it was a ton of fun, and one of the great things about that is during that experience, we had a parade that we did in Nashville, where we ended up doing a battle of the bands with Minnesota band. And the Minnesota band was huge, and Dr. Pease and Mr. Cook and a lot of the senior members of the band were basically talking about how UVA, the CMB was going to get blown out of the water. Just because we weren't as experienced, we weren't as technically skilled, we weren't as large of an organization. And we were something that hadn't been around a long time. It was maybe our second bowl game the marching band had done, so it was kind of like an experience. Mr. Pease, Dr. Pease, sorry, it's a bad habit. Dr. Pease was always very, very big with basically just promoting the band and finding ways to help us win, because it gave us good morale. So we showed up, we were marching down the streets, and we just had this impression that we, as the UVA CMB, were just going to get destroyed by this other band. And we show up, and they're playing very conservative march-style pieces, which is what you would expect of a good marching band. They were doing an excellent job of it, but then Dr. Pease would whip out some of these fun stand tunes, like Tear It Up, and the Land of 1,000 Dances, and different things like that. Or I think we even played El Toro at one point, and it just ended up being a huge crowd pleaser, and we had so much fun. We got so hyped up before the game, and the crowd absolutely loved what we were doing, which just kind of was vindicating, knowing that we not only did we spank the band, but we also beat them the next day in football as well. So that was a lot of fun. As far as the other bowl game I went to, was the Gator Bowl in 2007, 2008, and that was kind of a train wreck. We had some incidents with people enjoying a little beverage on the bus ride down, and people enjoyed too much beverage, and it ended up becoming a bit of a nightmare for a lot of people. What we had kind of anticipated to be a vacation in a lot of ways, just to be a lot of fun, a great experience to go see Jacksonville and have fun. And the bowl game became kind of a security nightmare in a lot of ways. Everybody was on lockdown. A lot of restrictions placed on every member of the organization, whether or not they were a problem. And it kind of translated to the level of musicality that we were playing. And you could just really feel the morale had been severely dragged down. And it did help that we were playing TCU at the time. I'm sorry, Texas Tech, so we were playing at the time, the Red Raiders, and we ended up having a terrible quarterback, and the quarterback ended up losing the ball in the end zone. Anyway, it was a bad trip overall. It was great to be there with other members of the CMB, but the experience itself was kind of. I think the redeeming quality of that, though, was when we showed up, a few members of the band fraternity and I went over to the Red Raider band and actually introduced ourselves, kind of saying hi to a lot of people over there. And being on that side of the stadium, we got to hear the CMB playing, and it was amazing. We thought that Texas Tech's band was just blowing us out of the water, but we went up to the other side of the stadium and realized that they really weren't, that we were going toe-to-toe with them, and we sounded excellent. And it's a wonderful and at the same time multi-learning experience just to step back into the band, see it from the outside, and see what it is that you're creating, and realize that you're doing a much better job than you might think. If you're standing in the middle of the stage and hear all the mistakes, you're probably making that one yourself. Just being outside of it it's great to hear the one band, one sound, very drumline, I believe.